Welcome back to the part 2 of my Penrith review. In the last video, I talked about the bigger picture, things like the future land plots, expected launch prices, and why this project is such a rare opportunity in Queenstown. But today, I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. I'll walk you through, of course, the unit types, layouts, and some of the details that buyers would really want to know before making a decision, and also a checklist on how to spot profitable projects. If you haven't caught part 1 yet, I will recommend you watching that first because it will give you a fuller context. If you're here just for the layouts, price, positioning, or my personal take on which stacks to look at, then you are in the right place. Before we get into Penrith today, just a quick note, you can also join my Telegram channel for the latest updates on new launches. I usually share early details, price guides, and even bounce out units there way before they hit the public market. You can either scan this QR code, and of course, if you want to speak with me directly, my number is right there as well. Also, like and subscribe to the channel so that you will not miss any weekly video updates. So the preview period for Penrith will be from 3rd to 14th October. If you'd like to head down, just contact me and I'll arrange it for you. This is really the best time to see it for yourself if Penrith is the right fit. To walk the show flat, see the show unit, study the layouts, and get a feel of what the project offers. And of course, the booking day will be on 18th of October. Penrith is jointly developed by Guaco Land and Hong Leong Holdings, two very established names in the Singapore property market. If you've been following the recent launches, you will know that these developers, they often work together. Projects like Lentor Mansion and Springleaf Residence were also part of their joint ventures, and they've also been actively acquiring land, including sites like Tengah Gardens Avenue and also Faber Walk. So when we talk about Penrith, it's not just really about the location, it is also backed by developers that have strong track records and long-term commitment to growth, and that gives buyers a lot more confidence in terms of delivery and quality. So let's run through some of the key project information for Penrith. It is a 99-year leasehold project. This project will have 2 blocks of 40 stories with a total of 462 units. TOP to be expected around 2029. On top of the residential component, right, there will be an early childhood development center and of course some communal facilities. In terms of parking, there are 377 lots, including EV charging lots, which is about 80% allocation. Overall, this gives you a very clear sense of scale. Basically, this is a high-rise development with full facilities positioned right at Margaret Drive. Most importantly, this is the last plot of land that's closest to the MRT station, which is just a short 4 minutes walk to Queenstown MRT. And on the northern side, right, you'll be facing GCB areas like the Rideout and Ridley Park landed enclave, which gives a sense of openness and greenery, and what I suspect would be the premium stacks. If you notice, most of the future residential plots that are highlighted over here are still subjected to detailed planning, so it is still unclear if it's going to be public or private housing, but most of them will be zoned at a lower plot ratio, which means that they will not be as high as Penrith. Looking closer at Penrith's immediate surroundings, right, you will notice that it is actually in between buildings. On one side, you have Queenstown Primary School, which is only just 4 stories tall, and also Rainbow Centre and also the Queenstown Baptist Church, which is only around 2 to 4 stories high. And on the south side, right, for the HDBs, Block 82 and 83, which will be around 24 and 21 stories. And the tallest one will definitely be the Skyview at Dawson, which is around 47 stories. But the blocks are actually positioned in a north-south direction so that you are not really facing the HDB blocks directly. Now let's take a look at the Penrith site plan. The developments again is made up of 2 residential blocks, each 40 stories high. And what is interesting is that the entire project is actually built on elevated ground, which is 15 meters up, which means that the lowest residential floor is already equivalent to the height of a 5-story building, which then gives the residents a natural advantage in terms of views and also privacy right at the start. So between these 2 blocks, right, it's also positioned a good 60 meters away. That's quite generous in today's standard, and I feel that it really helps to maintain the openness and airflow throughout the whole site. And there's also a very thoughtful separation when it comes to traffic flow. The Early Childhood Development Centre, they have their own dedicated drop-off and car park space, and it doesn't interfere with the residential movement. So for the residential car park, right, is actually going in from here. You will find that the car park is actually spread across the basement, level 1 and mezzanine. So it gives you plenty of options without cramping up in a single level landscaping. So each block is actually 6 units, is actually served by 3 lifts, and I feel that it's a practical ratio which helps reduce waiting times while still being efficient in the number of homes in each tower. There are also 3 drop-off points with the side gate at the south side, which links you to the school and also towards the MRT station. And here is a breakdown of Penrith unit mix. I feel that it's actually quite a good unit mix, given that the smallest units start from 2-bedroom, which makes up about 33% of the project. And then for 3-bedroom category, a total of 42%. And you also get larger formats like 3-bedroom with yard, which goes up to about 1,066 square feet, which will actually appeal to more families. And lastly, a good balance of this 4-bedroom, which will take up about 25%. And it goes all the way up to 1,281 square feet, which is decent for those who are in need of more space and still want to stay in the Queenstown region. So here's a schematic chart for Penrith. You can see how the units are stacked across both towers, Block 70 and Block 72. Each colour here represents different unit types, and it's quite easy to spot where the 2-bedders and 3-bedders and 4-bedders are positioned. So if you're someone who likes to study orientation or pick out specific stacks, this chart is the one that you want to refer to. And if you want a copy to look at in detail, you can just screenshot this, or you can also drop me a message and I will send you the full list. This time we want to do something a little bit more different. Instead of diving into the numbers, I'm going to give you a simple checklist that you can use to spot a profitable project. So what are some of the important attributes to take note? Some things like entry price comparing to the surrounding resale, the land supply in the area, whether the project offers you something unique in terms of layout or facilities, and of course the developer's track record. If you start looking at projects through these lens, right, it becomes more clear at which one will give you the extra edge in terms of profitability. So the first checklist here is actually land size. Do big plots really matter when it comes to profitability? Actually, most of the time, yes. Big lands tend to give developers more flexibility in design, more separation of facilities, and better separation between blocks. And that creates strong livability. And down the road, right, it will actually create a stronger resale demand. And it also usually means that there is a wider unit mix. It attracts different types of buyers, from investors to families. And when more buyers can see themselves fitting in, that usually translates to a higher resale value and potential profit. Of course, it's not just about the size. Location and design still matters, but generally a big land size do give a project that extra advantage. So we look at these 2 projects, Kent Ridge Hill and Whistler Glen. On paper, Kent Ridge Hill does sit on a much bigger plot of land of 29,000 square meters, while Whistler Glen sits on about 19,000. So technically speaking, right, based on the theory of larger land size having more profits, Kent Ridge Hill should be the one with the stronger profits, right? With bigger land, more facilities, and more space. However, when we actually look into the numbers, right, the story is quite different. Despite Kent Ridge Hill having a larger land size, Whistler Glen is the one that end up making more profits, not just in terms of maximum profits, but also in terms of average profit for individual units. Another important factor I want to highlight is actually visibility. So if we look at Kent Ridge Hill residence, right, the highest level is actually only at level 5. And to get there, right, you actually have to drive in a very, very deep road. From the main roads, you cannot actually see the project at all. It is surrounded by all these landed homes, which is about 3 or 3.5 stories high. So the visibility is very limited. So those people who actually know about Kent Ridge Hill residence is actually the people who stay around there. And when there's fewer people who know about the project, right, it's naturally tougher to actually generate traction when it comes to the resale market. So now when we compare it to Whistler Glen, right, it goes all the way up to 36 stories. And actually you can see it very clearly from the AYE. So if you drive along the expressway, you will spot it together with the other tall projects like Park Riviera and Clavon. And that kind of visibility actually makes a difference. Although you may not know which condo it is, just know that there's a tall condo there. That kind of visibility actually makes a difference. So Even though Kenridge Hill and Whistler Grand both launched at around the same period, Whistler Grand ended up being the one performing better in the resale market. So visibility actually matters more than what people think. When a condo is prominent, right, it actually stays top of the mind. And when buyers start searching in that area, they'll remember that it's there, and it will then give the project a very natural advantage. So this brings us back to the question, does Penrith have that kind of visibility? I would say that it is not the most visible, but it's definitely better than Margaretville, mainly because Penrith sits on a larger land size, which already gives it a stronger presence. But if we were to compare it to projects like Stirling Residences, Queen's Peak, or even Commonwealth Towers, those buildings are taller and much more visible from the main roads and the surrounding areas. So while Penrith has an edge over smaller and more tucked away projects, in the bigger picture, it doesn't really stand out as prominently as there are taller buildings around it like Skyview at Dawson, which is around 47 stories high. So you are surrounded by everything that is high-rise, so there isn't really a standout factor over here. And if we look at the Queenstown cluster, right, the visibility really varies by project. So take Commonwealth Towers and Queen's Peak by example. These are directly beside the MRT and they are 43 and 44 stories high. With that kind of height and prime placement, they are kind of impossible to miss. So now for Stirling Residences, right, although it's not directly next to the MRT, it's surrounded by actually low-rise HDBs. So the HDBs like Stirling View and also Mei Ling View, they are only up to 12 stories high. So for Stirling, right, which goes up all the way to level 40, it will naturally stand out in the entire neighborhood. And then lastly, we have Margaretville, which is also 40 levels high. But because the land plot is a lot smaller, the project does not really have the same level of presence as compared to the rest. And this is where visibility really shows its impact, right? So when we see Commonwealth Towers and Queen's Peak, they are right beside the MRT, very highly visible. You can see their resale performance actually reflects that. The highest profitable transaction here is actually crossing the $1 million mark. And that's a strong signal of how top of mind and easily recognized can directly translate to a stronger resale demand and ultimately better profits for the owners. And if we compare it to Stirling and Margaretville, right, the difference is actually clearer. Stirling Residences sitting on a much larger piece of land, the owners have already achieved more than 1 million of maximum profits. And on the other hand, for Margaretville being on a smaller piece of land, recorded a much lower resale gains of about $563,000. So land size and visibility do play a role. The bigger and more prominent the development, the more it tends to attract resale demand, and that usually translates into stronger profitability. Now, if we bring it back to Penrith, right, the land size is actually okay, quite decent, because generally the plots in Queenstown are not very big. It is still in a reasonable range. So for Penrith, the main entrance is along Margaret Drive, and unlike other projects that face the main road or the MRT, Penrith is a little bit more tucked in. And on top of that, right, the Dawson HDBs, like I mentioned, is already quite tall and prominent. So Penrith will not stand out much in the first glance, or rather it will look quite blended in because of the surrounding HDBs, which are 40 stories and also around 20 over stories as well, which means that people might not immediately know or recall where Penrith is as compared to something more visible like Queen's Peak, Commonwealth Tower and Stirling Residences. When it comes to profitability, right, there isn't just one magic factor. There are projects with big land size, but because they are hidden away with little visibility, they don't perform as strongly. And on the other hand, some projects that sit on a smaller land plot, but they make up for it with full facilities and high visibility, they actually do have a chance of doing well. So ideally, you do want a project that has both decent land size and also strong visibility. I think that is a sweet spot for long-term profitability. And of course, this still needs to be coupled with good layouts, plus also a reputable developer who knows how to price and deliver the project properly. So these are usually the 4 key criteria that I always look at. So now we go into a 2-bedroom analysis, and we only have 2 types, which is the 2-bed 1-bath and the 2-bed 2-bath. The 2-bed 1-bath comes with an open kitchen, and the layout is a little bit more traditional where bedrooms are on one side. It is compact, straightforward and efficient for those who don't need another bathroom, or maybe these are actually investors' purchase. And on the 2-bed 2-bath side, right, it gives you a tucked-in kitchen and a dumbbell layout where both bedrooms are separated on both ends. So essentially the difference between these two layouts is that one extra bathroom, the kitchen style, and also the layout preference. So the question now is, how do we determine a safe entry price? We will use a comparison method. In this case, we will take the newest kid on the block, which is Stirling Residence, and we stack it up against Penrith. So for Stirling Residence 2-bed 1-bath, which is 635 square feet, the highest transacted was actually $1.58 million. But because of harmonization, we need to reduce the size by about 7%, and that will actually give us about 591 square feet. So now when we divide the transacted price, right, by this harmonized size, it will work out to be $2,673 per square foot. So historically speaking, right, before COVID, the price gap between new launch and resale was actually very, very wide. On average, new launches back then was about 38% higher than resale condos, and that was actually considered a norm back then. But after COVID, things have actually changed. Demand for immediate housing actually increased. Resale prices were pushed up sharply because of that, and the gap between the new launch and resale prices have actually narrowed a lot. And in some cases, they are actually side by side. So here's another example. This time the gap between the new launch and resale is about 30%. And here's another example that is closer to what we are seeing in today's market. When Clavon actually launched, its average price was around $1,646 per square foot, only 9 to 10% higher than the Clement Canopy, which averages around $1,507 per square foot. So instead of the old calculation of 30 to 38% gaps, which we saw before, the difference here today is actually much narrower, and this smaller price gap actually makes sense in today's context because resale prices have already been pushed up very, very high. And that's why I think using around 10% as a benchmark between new launch and resale is actually a practical way to gauge a safe entry price right now. So I will bring this back to earlier where we were comparing the 2-bed 1-bath as a benchmark. And since we've established that 10% difference between new launch and resale is actually a very healthy normal, here's how it will play out. A very safe entry price for Penrith would be actually the same as Stirling Residence price, which is $2,488 per square foot, because you are buying a new launch at resale prices. However, if we factor in the 10% premium that new launches usually carry as compared to a resale, then a safe price for Penrith will be $2,736 per square foot. But once the price actually stretches too far, and that is usually more than 20%, which is about $2,985 per square foot, and that is where we'll consider that it's not a safe entry and your profits will likely be compromised. So in short, anything around the 10% higher mark would actually make sense as a fair and safe entry today, but anywhere closer to $3,000 per square foot, you will definitely need to think twice about it. So now let's talk about the 2-bed 2-bath, and we use the same Stirling Residence of 678 square feet. If we harmonize it, it will come down to 630 square feet. The highest transacted we've seen at Stirling Residence for 2-bed 2-bath is $1.8 million, and the harmonized price for this transaction will actually be $2,886 per square foot. So again, if we use back the same theory, very safe price for Penrith for 2-bed 2-bath will be actually the same as Stirling Residence resale, which is $2,681 per square foot. And if we add in the 10% premium over the resale, and that will work out to be $2,949 per square foot. And that is a level that I feel that you are still entering at a fair value. But once you jump further, 20%, and that will bring you to around $3,217 per square foot. And that is the point where I feel that is considered not a safe price, and buyers should be cautious if they are entering at that level. So now we take it one step further and compare the ROI between 2-bed 1-bath and 2-bed 2-bath. So the main difference between them is actually about $200,000 in price estimate. So the question here is that does the 2-bed 2-bath actually give you better returns, or is the 2-bed 1-bath actually a smarter entry? So when we take Stirling Residences as a reference point and take a look at their ROI, the numbers is actually quite interesting, right? For the 2-bed 1-bath, the highest profit is about 370,000, which gives you an ROI of 86.2%. But when we look at the 2-bed 2-bath, the highest profit jumps to about 490,000, and with an ROI of almost 93%. So even though the 2-bed 2-bath has a higher entry price, it doesn't just catch up. It actually delivers a stronger return. And that's because they have an added functionality of another bathroom, which makes it more versatile, easier to rent out, and more attractive in the resale market, especially for smaller families. So if you're looking for Penrith, my top pick will actually still be the 2-bed 2-bath because they are stronger in terms of ROI. And now we move on to the 3-bedroom analysis. We have 3-bedroom compact and the 3-bedroom premium. And when we look at the Penrith 3-bedroom compact sizes, here you have two sizes. You have 786 square feet and the 850 square feet. Compact basically means that there is no yard and no utility room. And among all the smallest 3-bedroom layouts across all the new projects these days, I think the 786 square feet here at Penrith is really the best. I mean, for its size, right, it really looks very, very complete. You got proper size bedrooms and you got an enclosed kitchen. You got windows everywhere that is actually needed. I mean, the only compromise is that the kitchen itself is a little bit smaller, but still, for buyers who are considering the 2-bedroom, but you have the eligibility and budget to top up, I strongly recommend you going for this 786 square feet 3-bedroom option instead. Because if you're going for a high floor 2-bedroom, it is likely the same quantum as this 3-bedroom on a lower floor. And now if we compare to the 850 square feet, you will notice there are some key difference. The kitchen here is larger, and also there is a glass panel which will actually make the kitchen feel a little bit brighter. On top of that, the living and dining area is also more generous, so the extra space really goes into making the common areas more comfortable. So technically speaking, this is a more appealing 3-bedroom compact layout. For the 3-bedroom compact, again, we take Stirling Residences as a reference. Again, 883 square feet. When we harmonize it, it goes down to 821 square feet. And the highest transacted for resale is 2.2 million. So if we harmonize this transaction, it will work out to be about $2,680 per square foot. So now if you apply the same framework that we used earlier, if Penrith pricing comes around at this level at $2,492 per square foot, I will consider that as a very safe entry. And if we add in 10% higher, which is $2,741 per square foot, I will still consider it as a safe price because it is in line with today's market norm between new and resale. However, again, if you're looking at 20% higher above the reference, which is $2,990 per square foot, and that's where I say that it crosses the not safe zone. And at this point, buyers would really need to think carefully about their future upside potential. When we look at the 3-bedroom compact versus the 3-bedroom premium, the main difference is really the space allocation. For the 936 square feet, you already get everything that a 3-bedroom buyer will need because you have 3 proper bedrooms, you have an enclosed kitchen, you have a yard, and you also have a WC and a store. And the 1066 square feet, on the other hand, it does come with some additional add-ons, which is actually the larger kitchen, and also that the living room is actually wider, and also a walk-in wardrobe. And the foyer area is a little bit smaller. So while the 1066 square feet is undoubtedly more spacious and gives you that more premium feel, right? The 936 square feet is arguably the sweeter spot. Because it already ticks all the functional boxes at a lower quantum. So in an area like Queenstown, right, there are a lot of surrounding HDB upgraders that are coming from 4-room flats. So a 936 square feet unit is going to feel more comfortable in terms of price point. So while both layouts actually work well, the 936 square feet will likely see a stronger demand simply because it balances practicality with affordability. And now we look at the 3-bedroom premium. Again, we use Stirling Residences 950 square feet. We harmonize it down to 911 square feet. The highest recent transaction is actually at 2.5 million, which works out to be around 2,744 per square foot on a harmonized basis. Again, we use the earlier framework. A very safe price will be the same as resale, which is $2,552 per square foot, which gives us a strong margin of safety. And the safe price will be 10% higher, $2,807 per square foot. And of course, the not safe price will be above $3,088 per square foot. Now let's move on to the larger 3-bedroom premium at Penrith, the 1,066 square feet layout. And to benchmark this, I've used Stirling Residence 1,055 square feet, which harmonized down to 981 square feet. And their most recent transaction, 2.7 million. And that works out to be $2,771 per square foot on a harmonized basis. Again, a very safe price will be the same as Stirling 2,557. Adding in 10%, 2,812. And of course, the not safe zone will be above $3,000 per square foot. So now when we look into the ROI of 3-bedroom compact versus the 3-bedroom premium, looking at Stirling Residence as a reference, right, you will realize that the 3-bedroom compact and 3-bedroom premium is actually very close, 126% and 128%. The difference is actually very marginal. And actually that makes sense if we think about the buyer pool. In Queenstown, most of the upgraders are coming from 3-room, 4-room, or even 5-room HDB flats. And when they move into the private property, right, they actually tend to gravitate towards either a 3-bedroom compact or 3-bedroom premium, depending on their budget and comfort level. So in Penrith case, right, both compact and premium layout will serve these upgraders very well. The compact will appeal to those who want a lower entry quantum while still enjoying a full 3-bedroom lifestyle. The premium, on the other hand, it will give you a little bit more space and features which some families will value. But because the demand is actually evenly spread out across both segments, right, the ROI potential does not swing too heavily in favor of one over the other. So in short, right, whether you're going for the 3-bedroom compact or premium, Penrith's layouts are generally well positioned to capture the upgraders market. And lastly, the 4-bedroom layout, we have two types, 4-bedroom and 4-bedroom premium. When we compare the difference between these two 4-bedrooms, the difference really comes down to the layout of the living area. One gives you a portrait living area and one gives you a landscape living area, which the landscape living area will immediately feel more expensive. This 1,173 square feet unit comes with one less common bathroom, whereas this 1,281 square feet will give you the extra space and also the extra toilet, which is very practical for most families. Now, in the new launch market today, the difference between a portrait layout and the landscape layout with an extra bathroom usually commands a top-up of around 500,000. But in Penrith case, right, the actual size difference between these two layouts is actually 108 square feet. And that translates to a price gap of likely less than 300,000. So if you are already considering the 4 bedrooms here at Penrith, right, this is really a straightforward decision. For less than 300,000 more, you will actually get a larger living space, additional toilet, and also a layout that buyers would prefer in the long run, which is why if you can, right, actually stretch that budget, go for the 1,281 square feet, and it would definitely be a smarter choice. Because when we actually reference to Lentor Central, which is, by the way, the same developer, the difference between this portrait layout and the landscape layout, right, is more than 200 square feet. 215 square feet to be exact. And because of that size jump, right, the quantum difference works out to be about $420,000, even though the larger unit is actually priced at a lower per square foot. And this gives us a very useful benchmark, right? Because when the size difference crosses 200 square feet, you almost see that there is a very substantial price jump. But the difference is only 120 square feet in Penrith. The top-up tends to be a lot smaller, which is why the 4-bedroom 1,281 square feet, right, at Penrith actually is very, very attractive. You get the benefits of a landscape layout with an additional toilet without having to pay this 400,000 premium. So again, let me emphasize, I will strongly encourage you to go for the 1281 square feet if you can, because with this layout, you get the landscape, living and dining area, you have a wide frontage and additional bathroom, essentially ticking every box for what a family upgrader would want. And the interesting part is that you're not actually paying a hefty premium of what we actually usually see in the market. Traditionally, the top-up is around 500,000, like I mentioned earlier. But here in Penrith, because the size difference is only 108 square feet, the price gap difference that we are seeing is likely to be about 300,000. And on top of that, right, the supply is actually very limited. There are only 38 units of these larger 4-bedroom unit types as compared to 76 units of the smaller version. So when it comes to the resale market in the future, right, your unit will definitely stand out. And if you think of Queenstown as a whole, right, there are not many projects offering this kind of landscape living and dining layout. And this scarcity will actually make the larger 4-bedroom here at Penrith a smarter pick in terms of livability and also long-term value. So in Penrith, there's also a priority booking and loyalty program in place. Essentially, it rewards the existing owners, ex-owners, and you will get priority access on the booking day. If you qualify under these categories like loyalty purchase or one-tier linkage with immediate family, you could be eligible for priority booking. And the main idea is that you get first dibs on picking a unit, and in some cases, even some additional perks. I won't go into details here because the list is quite extensive. If you want to check whether you qualify, you can drop me a DM and I'll send you the full breakdown. So the preview again for Penrith will run from 3rd October all the way to 14th October, and the booking day is on 18th of October. The preview window is really your chance to walk the show flat, study the layouts in person, and get a sense of which stacks you prefer before booking day comes around. So if you're keen to head down to the show flat during the preview, just give me a call or drop me a message. I'll arrange it for you. And if you'd like to keep yourself updated with the latest updates on Penrith, unit availability, or even bounce out units that sometimes pop up, join me on my Telegram channel, or you can WhatsApp me if you want to make a booking to see the show flat. And of course, if you found this video useful, do hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and I'll see you in the next one.